I believe in objective morality. I am not a moral relativist. And many atheists do. In fact, most philosophers are naturalists and don't believe in a God. I think it's like 71% from the last Pew poll that was taken. And most philosophers are moral realists. They believe in objective morality, even though many of them are atheists.
Hey everyone, welcome back. Genuinely glad you are here for this one because this might be one of the most intellectually charged conversations I have covered on this channel in a long time. So what we are looking at today is Tom Jump, an atheist who is absolutely not here to play it safe, going head to head with a Christian debater in a full structured debate about whether God exists. And what makes this one different from your typical back and forth is that Tom does not just disagree, he dismantles arguments from the inside out, using the other side's own logic against them in ways that are honestly hard to see coming. Do yourself a favor and stay all the way to the end because the final few minutes of this clip take a turn that I genuinely was not expecting, and I think it is going to stick with you long after the video is over. Also, I always love knowing where in the world people are tuning in from. Drop your city or country down in the comments. It genuinely makes my day seeing how far this community reaches. All right, let's get into it.
Anything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist. The universe has a cause. Granted, none of that has anything to do with a God. That cause could be an eternal natural thing. Stephen said, well, no, it can't be an eternal natural thing because there can't be like an actual infinity. Well, the reason there can't be an actual infinity is because infinity isn't a number. It's a property. It's like X. You can't have an actual X number of things in a barrel because there is a finite number of things in that barrel, which isn't an abstract concept like X. Infinity is the same thing. It's not an actual number. There's lots of different kinds of infinities. They can apply to sets. They don't apply to, there isn't a number. So of course there isn't an actual infinity because infinity isn't a number. It's a variable like X. So there isn't actually a problem here for the naturalistic explanation of the reality. It's just a description of language and how we use infinities. He said there's not enough time. If there's an infinite past, well then how did we get from infinitely negative to right now? Well, 47. There are infinitely many numbers before 47. There's infinitely many between 46 and 47. So how did I get to 47? I just picked it. In nature, you have this thing called quantum mechanics, where there's an infinitely many possibilities of where a particle can break down and shoot off an electron, but it just picks a particular time because of quantum mechanics, and that's how it occurs. So how could the universe have been created at a particular time, and even with an infinite past? Well, it's because of quantum mechanics can do that. Just pick a number, like I can just pick 47 or 52, even though there's infinitely many before that. So again, not really a problem for the naturalistic worldview. He brought up entropy and the second law of thermodynamics, but he forgot the first law. The first law says energy cannot be created or destroyed. So if we're going based off the laws of physics as absolute here, well then God kind of has a problem because he can't create energy. But luckily, the laws of physics don't apply absolutely in that sense. For example, the second law of entropy only applies to closed systems. And do we know the universe is a closed system? No. The universe is just everything we currently know about. It's not absolutely everything. So there could always be more outside of it that brings some in. That's the physics definition of nothing isn't an absolute nothing. It's just none of the stuff we currently know about. The cause must be spaceless, timeless, and immaterial. Well, lucky for us, we have those natural theories that can have those things. For example, Sean Carroll, emergent spacetime, where space and time itself can be emergent from more fundamental natural things that exist outside of spacetime. Or Nima Arkani Hamad with the amplituhedron, which is, again, something that exists outside of space and time, but is a natural thing. It's not a mind, it's just, these guys are both atheists, by the way, so there's no mind here. Itzel Bar is in two-time physics, so there can be other kinds of time independent of the time we experience. Same with Stephen Hawking's imaginary time, or Julian Barber's end of time. There's lots of different natural things that can be spaceless or timeless, because spaceless and timeless in physics just means outside of the known kind of space and known kind of time. It doesn't mean completely devoid of any kind of space or time. There's lots of natural possibilities there. And secondly, there's no evidence that a mind can exist outside of the physical realm or spacelessly or timelessly. We have no examples of spaceless or timeless minds. So to appeal to a spaceless, timeless mind would be no different from me appealing to a spaceless, timeless pineapple. We can assert that a pineapple can exist outside of space or time, but until we have evidence of that, it's kind of just a bald assertion. And it isn't grounded in physics. And these other things I listed, those are grounded in physics. So I would say they're a little more supported.
This is the moment where Tom Jump just completely flips the table. Because what people don't realize going into this debate is that the Kalam cosmological argument, which is basically the crown jewel of theistic arguments, has a massive hole in it that almost nobody talks about, and Tom sees it immediately. The argument goes like this. Anything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. Fine. Nobody is arguing with that. But here is where Tom Jump lands the first hit. He said this: none of that has anything to do with a God. That cause could be an eternal, natural thing. And that right there is the point that should have stopped the entire argument cold. Because the Kalam only proves a cause. It does not prove your cause. It does not prove a conscious, personal, loving deity. It proves something caused the universe. That is it. And then Tom does something even sharper. You have to understand what Stephen was trying to do. He used entropy, the second law of thermodynamics, to argue that the universe must have had a beginning, which points to God. Smart move. Except Tom Jump pointed out something that honestly should embarrass anyone who missed it. Tom said this: you brought up entropy in the second law of thermodynamics, but he forgot the first law. The first law says energy cannot be created or destroyed. So if you are going to use physics as your weapon, you have to use all of physics. You cannot cherry pick the law that helps you and ignore the one that destroys your position. That is not how science works. That is not how any of this works. And then, and this is the part that honestly made me pause, Tom Jump delivers what might be the most memorable line of this entire debate. He said this: to appeal to a spaceless, timeless mind would be no different from me appealing to a spaceless, timeless pineapple. Now, I know that sounds funny, but think about what he is actually saying. We have 0 examples of a mind existing outside of physical reality. Not one. Every single mind we have ever observed is attached to a brain, attached to matter, attached to space and time. So when someone says God is a spaceless, timeless mind, they are not describing something we have evidence for. They are describing something we have never seen, never measured, and never demonstrated. And Tom's point is devastating because of this. The natural alternatives he presented, like Sean Carroll's emergent spacetime or the amplituhedron, are grounded in actual physics, actual research, actual mathematics. The mind alternative is grounded in tradition and assumption. That gap matters enormously.
Secondly, morality. I believe in objective morality. I am not a moral relativist, and many atheists do. In fact, most philosophers are naturalists and don't believe in a God. I think it's like 71% from the last Pew poll that was taken. And most philosophers are moral realists. They believe in objective morality, even though many of them are atheists. You don't need a God to believe in objective morality. There's lots of different ways to explain it. Very complicated ways in philosophy. But one possibility is just say morality is a law of physics that we just haven't discovered yet. You don't need a God to explain these things or believe them. He brought up a lot of quotes from a lot of experts who said only God can explain this or the natural can't explain that. Well, they're just not really that creative because, again, you can come up with all kinds of explanations and people have done that. They're just not supported, as in we can't differentiate them from the other imaginary things. There isn't a scientific way to support them, which is why they don't believe those things can do it. And again, he said alternative explanations are not refutations, which, I mean, I agree, that's true, except in the case when the alternative refutations are equally supported in every way. If they're equally supported, then it is a refutation because your hypothesis is no more or less supported than the alternative. So he brought up the example of the rabbit and said, no, he didn't really work for him. But again, it is a refutation if the alternative is equally supported in every way. So, for example, I would use the example of naturalistic pantheism, which is eternal, all-powerful nature, no mind. It doesn't have a mind. So it's not a God by anyone's definition as far as I'm aware. But it can still explain morality and the laws of physics and the origin of the universe and the fine-tuning equally well or better than theism. I mean, there's nothing it can't explain that theism can explain. So as far as I can tell, it is equally or better in every way. Now, he mentioned his analogy that if we walk into a pet store and we go to an aisle labeled rabbits and see a box with a rabbit label on it, yeah, that's all good evidence of a rabbit. None of that works for a lizard or a coffee mug, but we don't have any of that for God. It's all things that can all be explained by a lizard or coffee mug equally as well. We just have a box. It weighs 2 pounds and that's it. That's all we know. We don't have anything that says rabbit. If he did, that would be evidence, and I would grant it. So he said that there can't be natural things because of an infinite regress. You can have, just like you can say God is a necessary thing to be the grounds of everything, you can say naturalistic pantheism is the necessary thing to be the grounds of everything. You can just apply this omni property to anything you want and just say, here's the necessary thing, which is the grounds of everything. It's another one of those properties that science doesn't use because there's no way to differentiate it between an imaginary thing and which one is the actually real one. So it's not really a supportable position. Why would something that doesn't have a consciousness do something? Well, why does God do something? I mean, is it just random? Does he do it because it's a part of his nature, right? It's his nature. He has this nature which compels him to do something. But wait a minute, the word nature is in there, so can't I just say nature has some property in itself that causes it to do something? Like, where's the difference here? Anything that a mind can do, unknown natural properties can also do, because there's reasons the mind does it. Like, for example, the nature of God. He does it because it's his nature. Well, we can say the nature of pantheism is why it does something like create a universe. All we're doing is saying, well, we don't understand why the universe was created. Well, we can just insert undiscovered law of nature or insert God with a conscious personal nature, and then now we have an explanation. But the reason scientists don't do this is, again, we can't tell the difference between the imaginary thing and the real one. It's just an assertion.
This is the part that blows my mind, because Tom Jump does something that almost nobody does cleanly in these debates. He does not just push back. He flips the entire moral argument on its head before Stephen even realizes what is happening. Tom said this: "I believe in objective morality. I am not a moral relativist, and many atheists do. And this matters more than people give it credit for, because the entire moral argument for God's existence assumes that atheists cannot ground objective morality. That without God, everything is just personal preference. That without a divine lawgiver, there is no real right or wrong." But Tom just walked right through that assumption and said, actually, most philosophers disagree with you. Around 71% of philosophers do not believe in God, and yet the majority of them are moral realists, meaning they believe in objective morality, without God. That is not a fringe position. That is the mainstream position in academic philosophy right now. And then watch what Tom does to the rabbit in a box analogy, because this is genuinely brilliant. Stephen had used this whole setup where if you walk into a pet store, go to the rabbit aisle, see a box labeled rabbit with a half-eaten carrot, you have good reason to believe there is a rabbit inside. The argument being that all the evidence lines up and points to God. But Tom Jump said this: "We just have a box. It weighs 2 pounds, and that's it. That's all we know." Meaning, in this actual debate, none of the specific evidence points exclusively to God. Everything Stephen presented can be explained by something that is not God equally well. The box does not say rabbit. There is no label. There is no carrot. There is just weight. And weight alone does not tell you what is inside. Here is what makes Tom's next point so sharp and honestly underrated. He catches something in the language of the God argument itself. Tom said this: "It's his nature. He has this nature which compels him to do something." But wait a minute. The word nature is in there. Read that again slowly. The defense for why God would create the universe is, it is his nature. His nature compelled him. But the moment you use the word nature to explain divine action, you have just opened the door for naturalism to walk right through. because I can say the same thing about a natural process. It has a nature. That nature caused the universe. Where exactly is the difference? Tom is not just winning points here. He is showing that the language being used to defend God actually undermines the exclusivity of the God explanation entirely.
He mentioned scientism. I am not a scientismist, or whatever you call them. I do not believe science is the only way to know things. And he's right. Logic, math, metaphysical truths, ethics and values, aesthetics, none of those are verifiable. Because what science does is it gives us a way to differentiate between what's imaginary and what's real. And from science perspective, all of those things, they're imaginary. Logic and math are formal languages. You can just go to the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, classical logic, first line, logic is a formal language. A formal language is like Python or C++. It's just a code that we use to describe things. So reality exists, reality is the way reality is, and we use logic and math to describe reality. They don't govern reality. They're not like things that exist outside of reality and force it to be a certain way. They're languages that we use to describe it. Metaphysical truths, the only metaphysical truth I know of is I think, therefore I am. That's like the only thing we can guarantee is a metaphysical truth. I exist because I experience and I can't not experience. But the big philosophical debate there, where that qualifies, don't know. Ethics and values, again, most philosophers are moral realists. They just don't believe that these things exist mind independently, and you don't need them to for them to be objective. Emergent properties can still be objective. For example, a triangle. Triangles don't exist. Like the perfect triangle doesn't exist. We can't find one anywhere. And if you drew like a triangle, you could zoom in and you see that it's not a perfectly straight line because the electrons are little bubble shapes. So it's impossible to draw a perfectly straight triangle. But we can still say that if there is a perfectly straight triangle, the angles add up to like 180 if it's a right angle. And so it has objective properties, even though it doesn't exist. And the same thing can be true of morality. Morality can be an abstract ideal that doesn't necessarily exist as a physical thing. And so you can still have objective morality, even if it's a product of a mind. And aesthetics was the last thing you mentioned. Again, the position on science is that's kind of an imaginary thing. It's a product of our mind. So from the position of science, like all of these things are essentially products of the mind. We don't have a way to differentiate the imaginary from the real because they're imaginary. So we can explain those in science pretty easily without any appeal to a God. So why doesn't God have the right to do what he wants with you? Well, because that's slavery. That's the definition of slavery. If someone owns you without your consent and you are forced to live for their purposes without consent, that's slavery. And I think most people would agree slavery is by definition immoral. It's not something that's okay. And so a moral God could not do that. And that's why God doesn't have the right to do what he wants with us, because it's immoral. Thank you.
Oh, this ending. This ending is where Tom Jump does something I genuinely did not see coming, and I think most people watching this debate did not either. Tom spends this last section systematically closing every remaining exit. Logic and math as proof of God? Tom says those are formal languages, like Python or C++. They describe reality, they do not govern it. They are tools we built to make sense of what we observe. That is actually a well-documented position in philosophy of logic going back decades. The idea that logic is a formal system rather than a Platonic entity floating outside of reality is not controversial in academic circles. It is just not talked about enough in these debates, and Tom brings it in naturally without making it feel like a lecture. But then, the moment everything escalates, Tom Jump said this. So why doesn't God have the right to do what he wants with you? Well, because that's slavery. The room gets quiet. Because what Tom just did is take the theological claim that God owns his creation and has the right to do with it as he pleases and ran it through a basic ethical filter. And what came out the other side is not pretty for the theistic position. Tom said this. I think most people would agree slavery is, by definition, immoral. It's not something that's okay. And here is why this lands so hard. Stephen had argued earlier that as God's creation, we owe our existence and allegiance to God. That God has the right to set the rules because he made everything. But Tom is pointing out, if you are created by someone, owned by someone, forced to live for their purposes without your consent, That is not a beautiful theological truth. That is a definition. And the definition matches something we universally recognize as wrong. You cannot call God perfectly moral and simultaneously defend a relationship structure that fits the definition of ownership without consent. Those two things cannot both be true at the same time. And Stephen's response was essentially, I don't know how to approach that, which honestly tells you everything. So what do you guys think of this? Leave your thoughts down in the comments. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.